The palace of Lumeria shined like a mountain of silver under the twin suns. Its tall towers touched the clouds, and the marble floors reflected every color of the sky. Tonight was the Festival of Grace, a night when dancers from every alien house came to prove their beauty. Music floated in the air, strange and sweet, and the crowd filled the hall with whispers of excitement. But in the highest balcony, the governor sat with heavy eyes. Her name was Lady Seraphine, ruler of half the planet, feared by her rivals. Respected by her allies, her face was sharp. Her voice was known to command thousands, yet her heart was weak tonight, for beside her sat her daughter Leora, small and fragile. The girl had been born with legs that did not move. She watched the dancers below but could not join them. The governor's power could control armies, but it could not heal her child. The nobles pretended not to see the governor's sorrow. They smiled, they bowed, they whispered behind jeweled masks. To rule others, one must be flawless, one alien whispered, and yet, her child cannot even stand, another sneered. The governor heard them. Her chest burned, but she stayed silent. She had survived wars and betrayals, but she could not fight this pain. Then a stranger entered the hall. He was not alien. His skin was pale, his eyes too small, his frame too thin. A human, one of the rare visitors allowed in the palace. He walked without fear, though others pushed away from him. Humans were seen as weak, useful only as servants or wanderers. But this one walked with a strange calmness. He looked at the governor's daughter and smiled as if he had known her forever. Leora's eyes widened, for no one outside her family had ever looked at her with kindness. The human bowed, but not too low, as if his respect was real but not forced. "Who are you?" Lady Seraphine demanded, her voice sharp like a blade. "My name is Daniel," the human said softly. "I am only a teacher." "A teacher of what?" One noble laughed. "Of weakness?" The hall laughed with him, their voices echoing against the crystal walls. Daniel did not answer. Instead, he knelt beside the child. "Do you like the music?" he asked her gently. Leora nodded slowly, her eyes shining. "Would you like to move with it?" Daniel whispered. The girl froze. Her hands shook. "No," she whispered back. "I cannot." "You can," Daniel said. "Not like them. But in your way." The governor's heart pounded. Her mouth opened to stop him, but something in his voice silenced her. The music swelled, drums like thunder, strings like silver rain. Daniel took the girl's hands and guided them gently. Her fingers trembled, then flowed like water. The movement was small, fragile but alive. The crowd grew quiet. Whispers died. For the first time, the governor's daughter was part of the dance. Seraphine's lips parted, her chest tightened. She, the most powerful woman in Lumeria, felt tears rise. Her rivals stared in shock. Why would the governor cry in front of them? But the sight was too much. Her daughter's smile broke the armor of her pride. And the human's calm face made her wonder if weakness was not weakness at all. The nobles tried to laugh again, but their voices cracked. This was no trick of medicine. No machine hidden in the floor, it was something else. Something they could not name. "What is this sorcery?" one whispered. "It is no sorcery," Daniel answered, his voice carrying across the hall. "It is the dance of being alive." The hall shivered with silence. The child's small movements became slower, then stopped. She leaned against him, tired but smiling. The governor reached out and touched her daughter's hair. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but the words refused to come. Her throat burned, her pride trembled, her tears fell before she could hide them. And so on the night of the Festival of Grace, the strongest ruler of Lumeria cried in public. Not from defeat, not from shame, but from hope. The crowd could not understand what they had seen, but they knew this. Something had changed in the palace. Something dangerous, something powerful, something deeply human. The music ended. But the silence did not break. Everyone watched the human, the child and the weeping governor. No one dared to move, for in that moment, the galaxy's oldest rules felt fragile, and a new story was about to begin. The palace did not sleep that night. After the Festival of Grace, every noble carried whispers in their hearts. They spoke not of the winners of the dance, nor of the beauty of the music. They spoke only of the governor's tears and the strange human who made a crippled child move. Lady Seraphine, the governor of Lumeria, sat alone in her chamber. The stars outside her window burned cold and distant. She had ruled with strength for many years, yet tonight her enemies saw her weep. She clenched her fists, ashamed of her own weakness. But when she remembered her daughter's smile, her shame melted into wonder. For the first time in many years, she felt hope. The guards brought Daniel to her chamber. The human bowed politely but not in fear. Seraphine studied him with sharp eyes. "You are no doctor, no engineer, no priest," she said. "Yet you achieved what none of them could. Tell me, human, what secret do you carry?" Daniel smiled faintly. "No secret, my lady. Only patience and trust," the governor frowned. Her voice low and hard. "Do not play games with me, human. I command fleets that burn worlds. I bend law with a word. And yet you made my daughter do what even our science cannot. Tell me how." Daniel looked at her calmly. "Your science tries to force the body. Your medicines fight the flesh," he said, "but humans, we listen to the heart first, then the body follows." Seraphine leaned back, her mind torn between anger and curiosity. "Are you telling me that weakness can become strength?" she whispered. Daniel's eyes glimmered. "I am telling you that sometimes weakness hides a new kind of strength. One you cannot measure with your machines." Unknown to them, spies hid in the shadows of the palace. Rival nobles had sent agents to learn the truth. They pressed their ears to the walls, listening to every word. If the human's method was real, it could change the balance of power. If a human could heal, a human could also destroy. The next morning, rumors spread like fire. The governor's daughter danced, the markets cried. A human touched her and she moved, the taverns whispered. By noon, the council of houses demanded answers. They summoned Seraphine to stand before them. The council chamber was vast, its walls carved with the victories of the past. Nobles sat on golden thrones, their eyes sharp as blades. "Governor Seraphine," the High Lord said, his voice deep as thunder. "We hear strange stories from your palace, stories of your crippled daughter moving before witnesses. Tell us the truth." Seraphine raised her chin, her pride fighting her fear. "It is true," she said, her voice steady. "My daughter moved." And she smiled. The nobles gasped, some with disbelief, others with envy. "And how did this miracle happen?" the High Lord asked. Seraphine hesitated, then spoke. "It was the human called Daniel." A storm of voices erupted. "Impossible," shouted one. "Humans are weak," sneered another. "Perhaps it is forbidden sorcery," growled a third. Daniel was brought into the chamber. He stood alone before the circle of alien power. The nobles glared at him, their faces twisted with disgust and fear. "Explain yourself, human," the High Lord commanded. Daniel bowed slightly. "I did not heal her legs," he said. "I only showed her that she could move in her own way." Laughter shook the chamber. Cruel and sharp. "Do you claim to be wiser than our doctors? Stronger than our machines?" one noble mocked. Daniel did not flinch. "No," he said quietly. "I claim only that humans understand something you have forgotten." "And what is that?" Seraphine asked, her heart beating fast. Daniel looked at her daughter, who sat nearby, her eyes wide with hope. "The will to try," he said. "The will to keep moving even when the body says no." The chamber grew silent. The words were simple, yet they struck deep. For all their power, the nobles feared failure more than death. They built machines to erase weakness, but never taught their children how to endure it. To them, Daniel's words were dangerous, for they carried truth. That night, Seraphine walked with Daniel through the palace gardens. The air was heavy with the scent of silver blossoms. "My enemies will use this against me," she whispered. "They will say I let a human poison my bloodline. They will call me unfit to rule." Daniel stopped and looked at her. "Then you must decide, my lady, is your power worth more than your daughter's smile?" Seraphine froze. No rival, no enemy, no ally had ever dared ask her such a question. She wanted to be furious, to strike him down, but her heart trembled with the memory of Leora's laughter. For years she had ruled with strength, but in a single night her daughter had ruled her with joy. As the twin moons rose over the palace, the governor realized her world had shifted. The secret was not in human hands, nor in human machines. It was in the human spirit itself. A force the nobles did not understand, a force they feared. And in that moment, Lady Seraphine knew that her fight had only begun. The palace of Lumeria glittered under the twin moons, but inside its walls shadows stretched long and restless. Servants whispered of danger, guards doubled their patrols, yet fear lingered in every corner. For news of the governor's daughter and the human had spread beyond the palace walls. Enemies smelled weakness, rival houses plotted in silence. If a human could inspire movement in the crippled child, what else could he inspire? To them, Daniel was not a teacher, but a weapon waiting to be used. Or destroyed. That night, while Lady Seraphine met with her advisors, Daniel walked alone through the grand corridors. The alien stone beneath his feet glowed faintly, alive with ancient energy. He felt eyes on him, but when he turned, there was nothing. The silence of the hall pressed against his ears like heavy water. In another chamber, young Leora lay awake, her body weak but her mind alive with excitement. She remembered the music, the movement of her hands, and the joy in her mother's eyes. For the first time, she dreamed of a future not chained to stillness, but her joy twisted into fear. What if the nobles took Daniel away? What if she never moved again? The spies came just before midnight, figures cloaked in black, their masks smooth and silver. They slipped through hidden doors and secret passages. Their steps made no sound, their blades carried poison. They had one mission: capture the human alive, deliver him to their masters. Daniel heard the faintest scrape of metal. He stopped, his heart steady but alert. From the shadows a whisper came, "Human, surrender." He turned slowly, his eyes calm. "I thought the nobles preferred open debate," he said. "Not cowardly tricks." 3 assassins stepped forward, their alien forms tall and cruel. "Your tricks with the governor's child have made you dangerous," one hissed. "You will come with us or you will not live to see dawn." Daniel did not move. Instead, he whispered to the shadows, "You should not be here." Suddenly, a door creaked open. Leora sat in her chair, her blanket around her shoulders. Her wide eyes met the assassins and she screamed. The sound cut through the palace like a blade. Guards rushed in, alarms rang, steel clashed against steel. The assassins struck fast, their blades flashing. Daniel grabbed a torch from the wall. Swinging it in wide arcs, flames hissed. Shadows danced like angry spirits. The guards fought fiercely, but the assassins were skilled. One lunged toward Leora, blade raised. Daniel threw himself between them, the torch crashing against the mask. The assassin fell back, hissing in rage. Lady Seraphine burst into the hall, her cloak flowing like storm clouds. "What is this madness?" she roared, her voice shaking the walls. She saw her daughter pale and shaking, saw Daniel standing like a shield, and saw the assassins melting back into the dark. "Catch them," she ordered, but the shadows swallowed them whole. The guards chased, but none were found. The palace returned to uneasy silence. Seraphine knelt beside her daughter, holding her trembling hands. "Mother," Leora whispered, "they wanted him. They wanted Daniel." Seraphine's eyes blazed. "Of course they did," she said bitterly. "They fear what they cannot control." She turned to Daniel, her voice hard but tinged with something new. "Why did you not run? Why risk your life for her?" Daniel looked at her quietly. "Because she is not broken," he said. "She only needed someone to believe in her, and I will not let that be stolen." The governor's chest tightened, her heart torn between pride and fear. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had dared. She wanted to order him out, to send him far away. But when she looked at her daughter's face, glowing with trust she could not, later that night, Seraphine stood alone in the council chamber. Her advisors warned her, "Remove the human," they said. "Before your enemies use him to destroy you, keep him, and they will say you betrayed tradition." But Seraphine's mind replayed the scene. Daniel shielding her child, the assassin's rage, the trembling joy in Leora's eyes. The stars above the glass ceiling burned cold and eternal. Her empire was strong, her armies vast. But something had changed. She realized power alone could not protect her daughter. And perhaps, just perhaps, this fragile human carried a strength none of them understood. Far away, in the dark halls of rival houses, messages flew like daggers. "The human is dangerous," one lord wrote. "If he can awaken the broken, he can awaken rebellion," another whispered. Plots thickened, plans sharpened, and in the shadows of Lumeria, the first sparks of war began to stir. But in the quiet of her private chamber, Lady Seraphine held her daughter close. The girl whispered with tired joy, "Mother, when I move I feel alive." Seraphine closed her eyes. For the first time she feared not for her throne, but for her heart, and in the silence of the hall, she swore a vow, "Whoever comes for him, they will face me first." The high council chamber was carved from black stone, glowing faintly with veins of crystal. Every ruler, every noble house, every rival of Lady Seraphine had gathered there. The air was thick with pride, envy, and the hunger for power. This was the place where thrones were secured or broken. At the center of the chamber stood a raised platform, wide enough for a dancer's performance. Tradition demanded that every governor present their child during the festival season. It was a show of beauty, strength, and legacy. But for years, Seraphine had hidden her daughter, protecting her from the cruel eyes of rivals. Now, whispers filled the chamber. "They say the crippled child danced," one alien hissed. "A lie," another replied. "It must have been a trick. Or perhaps sorcery," a third muttered, their eyes flicking toward the human standing near Seraphine. The High Lord raised his hand, silencing the room. "Governor Seraphine," he said, his voice echoing through the hall. "You have brought us a strange story, a story that defies reason." His sharp gaze turned to the human. "And you have brought us a stranger still." Daniel stood calm, his hands behind his back, his eyes steady. To the nobles he looked fragile, but to Seraphine he seemed unshaken. The governor's rivals leaned forward eagerly, waiting for her to fail. If her daughter did not prove herself, Seraphine's power would crumble before them all. The governor took a deep breath. She placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Leora," she whispered, "you do not have to do this." But the girl shook her head, her small face fierce. "I want to," she said softly. "I want them to see I am alive." The drums began, low and slow. The chamber lights dimmed, crystal veins glowing like stars. All eyes turned to the girl, her thin body sitting at the center of the platform. Daniel stepped forward and knelt beside her. Whispering quietly, "You do not need to stand," he said. "You only need to move in your way." The music rose, deep and haunting. The crowd leaned closer, their eyes sharp, their mouths ready to sneer. Then the girl raised her arms. Her fingers moved with the rhythm, trembling at first, then flowing like water. The nobles gasped. The child's movements were not strong, not perfect, but they were filled with life. Seraphine's throat tightened. Her rivals shifted uneasily, their sneers faltering. The girl's arms swayed like wings, her head tilted with the rhythm. Her eyes glowing with joy. She was not broken, not helpless, she was defiant. A voice cried from the crowd, sharp and bitter. "This is mockery, not dance," another voice shouted. "The governor insults our traditions." But before the noise could rise, Daniel's voice cut through the chamber, calm and clear. "Dance is not in the legs," he said.
"It is in the heart." The crowd grew silent.
Struck by his simple words, the drums quickened, and Leora's movements grew bolder. Her hands traced the air like silver light, her body twisting in the chair with unexpected grace. The hall, filled with doubt moments ago, now could not look away. The High Lord leaned forward, his ancient eyes unblinking. He studied the girl, then the human, then Seraphine. Finally he spoke, his voice low but carrying through the hall. "Strange, yet I cannot deny what I see. But Seraphine's enemies would not surrender so easily." "This is dangerous," one noble spat. "If a human can teach this, what else can he teach?" Another growled. "Today it is dance, tomorrow it is rebellion." Fear spread through their voices, not of weakness but of change. Daniel looked at them calmly. "Perhaps rebellion is not the danger," he said softly. "Perhaps the danger is that you will no longer be the only ones who decide what strength means." The chamber shook with anger. Nobles shouted, their voices like thunder. But above the noise, the girl's laughter rang out. Pure, bright, unbroken. It silenced them more than any blade could. Lady Seraphine stood tall beside her daughter. Her eyes burned with pride and defiance. "You wish to see truth," she said, her voice sharp as iron. "Here it is, my daughter is alive, she is strong. And no council will shame her again." The nobles recoiled, some furious, some unsettled. They had expected weakness, but found a challenge, and in that moment, they knew the governor had gained not only a daughter's smile, but a new weapon, a human weapon they could neither control nor destroy without risk. As the drums ended and silence filled the chamber, the High Lord raised his hand. "This matter is not closed," he warned. "Your human may live for now, but beware, Governor Seraphine. For shadows grow when light is too bright." Seraphine bowed stiffly, her heart burning with both victory and fear. The council was shaken, but not defeated. Her enemies would strike again, she knew it. But as she looked at her daughter's glowing face, she whispered to herself, "Let them come. For now I have something worth fighting for." The palace walls trembled with tension. The council session had ended, But the storm it unleashed had only begun. Rival houses carried whispers back to their fortresses. "The governor has let a human defile our traditions," they hissed. "Her daughter moves, yes, but what if tomorrow she leads?" They feared Lady Seraphine knew danger was close. The High Lord's warning echoed in her ears. Shadows grow when light is too bright. Her enemies would not forgive the humiliation, nor would they forget the sight of her tears in public. That night Daniel walked with Leora in the moonlit gardens. She moved her hands with joy, imitating the dance from the council hall. Her laughter spilled like silver water, soft and full of life. "You see?" she whispered. "I can still dance even without legs." Daniel smiled gently. "Dancing is not about what you cannot do," he said. "It is about what you choose to do." But as he spoke, armored figures appeared from the shadows. Royal guards, their faces hidden behind steel masks. They surrounded him silently, their blades gleaming in the moonlight. "Daniel of Earth," their leader declared. "By order of the High Council, you are under arrest," Leora gasped, clutching Daniel's hand. "No," she cried, her small voice breaking. Seraphine rushed into the garden at the sound. Her cloak swept across the stone, her eyes burning with fury. "What is this treachery?" she demanded. The guard bowed stiffly. "My lady, the council fears the human's influence. They say he corrupts your bloodline. He must be removed." The governor's heart raged. But her mind calculated quickly. To defy them openly could spark war. To surrender him would break her daughter's spirit. "Mother," Leora whispered, her voice shaking, "without him, I cannot move again." Her eyes filled with tears, and Seraphine's iron mask cracked for all her power. She could not bear her child's sorrow. She turned to the guards, her voice trembling with both pride and grief. "Take him, but mark my words," she said. "If harm comes to him, your council will answer to me." Daniel bowed his head. "Calm even in chains. Do not weep for me, child," he whispered to Leora. "What I have given you cannot be taken away." The guards dragged him into the darkness. Leora screamed, reaching out with trembling hands. Her voice echoed through the palace halls like a broken song. Seraphine stood frozen, torn between her throne and her heart. For the first time in her reign, she felt powerless. News of the arrest spread faster than fire. The city buzzed with whispers. "Why does the council fear a single human?" they asked. "Why chain a man whose only crime was teaching a child to smile?" The people began to wonder, and questions were more dangerous than blades. In the council prison, Daniel sat alone. The cell was dark, carved deep into the mountain. But his spirit was calm, his mind steady. He had faced fear before. He had lived through wars and loss on earth. Chains could bind his hands, but not his will. Back in the palace, Leora refused to eat, refused to rest. Her eyes stayed fixed on the gates where Daniel had disappeared. Her voice cracked as she whispered again and again, "Bring him back. Bring him back." Seraphine watched her daughter's suffering, and something broke inside her. The governor, who had never bent to enemies, who had never shed a tear in battle, now stood helpless before the sorrow of a child. She clenched her fists, her tears falling unhidden, and for the second time in public memory, Lady Seraphine cried, not from shame but from love. Her advisors begged her to stay silent. "If you defy the council, they will strip your title," they warned. "If you fight for the human, they will call you traitor," they pleaded. But Seraphine's heart was no longer chained to her throne. Her heart belonged to the laughter of her daughter, to the hope Daniel had awakened. The palace servants whispered in awe. "The governor weeps for a human," they said. "The governor dares to defy the council." And in those whispers, seeds of rebellion began to grow. Seraphine stood before the great mirror in her chamber. She stared at her reflection, a woman of power, a ruler of iron. But the face that looked back was no longer just a governor. It was a mother, fierce and unyielding, and she knew the council had miscalculated, for they thought they had taken a weak servant. But they had instead created a fire in her heart. She wiped her tears, her voice steady now. "If they want war, they shall have it," she whispered. "But not for my throne, not for my pride, for him. And for her, far beneath the palace." Daniel sat in his chains, he closed his eyes and smiled faintly. He knew Seraphine would not abandon him. Not now, not after the price had been paid. And in that silence he whispered to himself, "This is only the beginning." The arrest of the human did not remain a secret. By dawn, every market, every tavern, every port in Lumeria buzzed with whispers. The governor's human was chained, they murmured. Why chain a man who only taught a child to smile? They asked. And like sparks on dry grass, the question spread. Beyond the city walls, starships carried the story to other worlds. Some alien rulers laughed. A human with power. Nonsense. Others frowned. If a human can heal, then he can also destroy. And still others whispered in fear. If humans can awaken what is broken, then what will happen if they awaken entire planets? Lady Seraphine sat in her war chamber, the walls glowing with maps of stars. Advisors surrounded her, voices sharp with warning. Already the houses prepare their fleets, one said. They claim your loyalty to the human is treason. Another hissed. They will strike soon, and you cannot face them all. But Seraphine's face was set like stone. They think I will bow to them. They are wrong, she said. They think my tears are weakness. They are blind. Her daughter sat nearby, pale but fierce. Mother, Leora whispered, do not let them take him. Her small voice carried more weight than all the generals in the room. In the depths of the council prison, Daniel sat quietly. He listened to the distant hum of alien machines. Chains bound his wrists, but his mind was free. The guards mocked him. Human, do you think you are special? Daniel only smiled. Not special, he said softly. Only stubborn, and yet far across the stars, his stubborn spirit began to stir storms. On mining colonies, slaves whispered, if a human can make a crippled child dance, perhaps we too can rise on war-torn moons. Soldiers muttered, if a human can face nobles with calm, perhaps we too can defy them. Rumors became fire. Some called for humans to be destroyed before they grew too bold. Others demanded they be raised as guides, teachers of spirit. The galaxy trembled not because of fleets or weapons, but because of an idea. And ideas were harder to kill than armies. Meanwhile, Seraphine's enemies met in secret halls. We must strike now, one lord declared. Before the governor's human becomes a symbol, another agreed. They planned assassinations, invasions, sabotage. They believed they were preparing for war, but in truth, they were feeding the very fire they feared one night. As Seraphine walked the palace corridors, a messenger arrived breathless. My lady, he gasped. The outer colonies rise in your name. She froze. In my name? Yes, he said. They chant that the governor who wept for her daughter will weep for them too. They call you the mother of defiance. Seraphine's heart trembled. She had not sought rebellion, but rebellion had found her. Her tears, once seen as weakness, had become a banner. Her human, once mocked as fragile, had become a spark across the stars. That same night, Daniel was brought before the council once more. The High Lord studied him with cold eyes. You have stirred unrest across worlds, he said. You are dangerous. Daniel tilted his head slightly. Dangerous? He echoed. Because I taught a child to smile. The nobles growled. Because you awaken hope. Daniel smiled faintly. Then it is not me you fear, it is your own people. His words cut deeper than any blade. For the council ruled through fear, and fear was slipping from their hands back in the palace. Seraphine stood at the balcony with her daughter. The night sky was filled with streaks of light, ships rising, fleets moving, stars burning. War is coming, Seraphine whispered. Leora clutched her hand tightly. Then fight, the child said, her eyes fierce. Fight for him, fight for me, fight for all who are broken. The governor's throat tightened. Her daughter's voice carried the same fire Daniel had kindled. She realized the war was no longer about power or territory. It was about something greater, something eternal. It was about the meaning of strength itself. And in the silence of the night, as fleets moved like shadows across the stars, Lady Seraphine swore her vow. They wanted to chain one human, she whispered. But they have unchained an entire galaxy. Far away in his dark cell, Daniel opened his eyes. He felt it too, the shift, the tremor, the awakening. And though he was chained, he smiled. Because the fire of humanity had already crossed the stars and no chain could hold it back. The council chamber shook with the rumble of warships above the planet. Alien fleets filled the sky like a storm of fire. Lumeria's enemies had gathered not to debate but to strike. The High Council declared the governor guilty of treason. Her crime was not war, not conquest, but allowing a human to awaken hope. Lady Seraphine stood tall in the hall of judgment, her cloak black as midnight. At her side sat Leora, fragile but unyielding. Around them nobles shouted, their voices sharp as blades. "Remove her throne," they demanded. "Destroy the human before his poison spreads," they cried. From the shadows, guards dragged Daniel forward, chains heavy around his wrists. He walked slowly, but his eyes were calm. The chamber buzzed with hatred and fear. Yet Daniel looked not at the nobles, but at the child. And when she met his eyes, she smiled. That small smile was stronger than all the shouting in the hall. The High Lord rose, his voice cold. "Governor Seraphine, this ends tonight. Surrender your throne, surrender your human, or your house will burn," the crowd roared, waiting for her to kneel, but Seraphine stepped forward. Her voice sharp as steel. "You think my tears made me weak," she said. "You think my child is a burden? You think this human is a threat? But you are wrong." She turned and lifted her daughter into the center of the chamber. "Look at her," Seraphine commanded. The chamber fell into uneasy silence. Lyra sat in her chair, small and trembling, but Daniel knelt beside her and whispered softly, "Now is the time, little one. Show them your dance." The drums began without command. A haunting rhythm echoed through the black stone chamber, all eyes fixed on the child, waiting to sneer, waiting to mock. But then her arms rose. Her hands traced the air like silver fire. Her head tilted with the rhythm, her smile glowing like a star. She danced, not with legs, but with soul. Her movements were simple, yet each one cut through the chamber like light through shadow. The nobles gasped, their voices caught in their throats. The girl laughed softly, her laughter ringing louder than the drums. And for the first time, the chamber of judgment felt alive. Daniel's voice carried through the silence. "This is strength, not in muscle, not in power, but in spirit." The council stirred uneasily. They had ruled through fear, but this was something they could not crush. A crippled child was defying them without blade or army. And the people beyond the walls were watching outside. Crowds filled the city. Screens lit the streets, showing the council chamber. When they saw the girls dance, they fell silent. Then one voice shouted, "She lives." Another cried, "She is strong." And soon the city roared with one voice, "No more chains. No more lies." The High Lord slammed his staff against the floor. "This is rebellion," he thundered. But the noise of the people outside drowned even his command. For the first time in centuries, the council's power trembled. Not because of armies, but because of hope. Seraphine raised her daughter's hand high. "You wanted to see weakness," she cried. "Instead, you have seen life, you have seen defiance. You have seen the strength of spirit that no chain can bind." Her voice cracked. Her eyes burned with tears. "Call it rebellion if you wish. I call it truth." Daniel stepped beside her. Chains still heavy on his wrists, he looked at the council. His voice steady. "You can chain me. You can chain her. You can chain every human. But you cannot chain what we awaken." His words struck like fire. Spreading through every ear, the council knew then their rule had cracked. In the streets, the people surged forward. Shouts turned to songs. Tears turned to fire. Across the stars, colonies rose. Soldiers laid down their weapons. The rebellion had no flag, no army, only a dance, a smile, and a human's words, but that was enough. The council guards drew their blades, ready to strike. But Seraphine's own soldiers stepped forward, shields raised. In that moment, sides were chosen, not between houses, but between fear and hope. The Hall of Judgment became the first battlefield of a greater war, and yet at its heart a child still danced, her hands moving like light, her laughter rising above the clash of blades. The last dance of Leora, they would call it. The moment when one child's defiance broke the silence of centuries. The moment when humanity showed the stars what it meant to endure. When the drums ended, the hall did not return to silence, it returned to change. Nothing would be the same, not for Seraphine, not for Leora, not for Daniel, and not for the galaxy. For a single dance had opened the path to freedom. And the story of humans had only just begun.